Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Xiong. In China, the state owns all land and leverages control of energy resources and the financial system. The right to operate in certain areas or activities is essentially reserved for the state. But the state can delegate that responsibility to others, including the private sector. This is the so-called China model. Massive state-owned enterprises rule sectors such as power and banking. But today, 9 in 10 new jobs come from the private sector. Chinese state media reported the private sector drives the majority, over 60% of GDP growth. The beginnings of China's economic model can be traced back to 1978, when China's then leader Deng Xiaoping began a series of economic reforms that would end decades of isolation under Mao Zedong. Under Deng's leadership, China tried to draw in foreign investment and slowly increase the role of the market in what was then a state-run communist country. While the state maintained a heavy hand in the economy over the coming decades, in 2001, China won entry into the World Trade Organization, promising significant market opening in a wide array of industries and giving the West hope that China was on a path toward a gradual reduction of the state's role in the economy. In the beginning, China did make significant strides, reducing tariffs, laying off tens of millions of workers at state-owned industries, and encouraging private business. Foreign analysts began to spread ideas on a China model, even as their Chinese counterparts declined to embrace the label. But particularly since Chinese President Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, the state has tightened its grip on the economy, helping many state-owned companies grow and even requiring foreign companies to have a member of the Communist Party on their boards. And Xi has departed from usual practice by nodding to the existence of a China model. As relations with other wealthier, technologically advanced countries deteriorate, will China's hybrid state-capitalist economy function with efficiency? That is probably the most crucial economic question of the 2020s. There are signs of real progress, much of it driven by foreign pressure and the fear of stagnation as economic reforms stalled. But the enduring power of Chinese state-owned companies and their pull over the financial sector still represent huge vulnerabilities. The enduring problem of state-owned enterprises remains obvious. In China, only state-owned enterprises can borrow money from state-owned banks with favorite interest rate. Private companies must pay extra to borrow. Despite a spate of state-owned enterprises bond defaults in November, the extra yield that private industrial companies pay has barely budged. Even though Beijing issued quite a few tough talks, but so far it failed to remove the impression that state-owned enterprise debt is a safer bet. That is a significant problem for China's technological ambitions. Notably Huawei and ByteDance, owner of TikTok. Those two are not state-owned enterprises. ByteDance enjoyed early support from US venture capital. Huawei grew up with various forms of state support and later on by competing head-to-head in global export markets. As relations with the US erode, rising Chinese tech companies will probably encounter higher barriers to both foreign financing and foreign markets. If key internal Chinese markets remain unfairly tilted towards companies with good political connections rather than the best products, China may struggle to birth many new companies truly pushing the technological frontier. China's would-be semiconductor champions, many of them state-owned, are in fact running into trouble at an escalating rate. Tsinghua Uni Group has now defaulted on multiple bonds. Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corp SMIC, is being added to a U.S. government export blacklist, which could hamstring the company's ambitions to develop current generation chips. Will China give more space to market forces in high technology? If SMIC starts losing customers or quality suffers as a result of escalating U.S. restrictions, will Beijing pressure companies like Huawei to keep buying from them anyway? Will state banks stand behind them? If so, that will mean fewer resources available for companies that might have a better chance of really pushing the technological frontier, either in chip making or something else. SMIC already raised billions in new equity funding in 2020 and enjoys incredibly low bond finance costs. Beijing is pouring huge amount of Chinese people's money to engage in a massive, long-shot attempt to build from the ground up an advanced semiconductor manufacturing capability, a capability that doesn't depend on foreign suppliers. Beijing calls it securing digital sovereignty. A better strategy will be to mend its relations with the West and reform China's dysfunctional credit system, then import chips and let Chinese markets and the Chinese companies decide what China is really good at. Sadly, that seems unlikely. Given Xi Jinping's ideological bent, if Beijing persists in a mercantile, actively hostile approach to core Western values and interests, the U.S. has options to respond. The first is a swift passage of CHIPS for America Act, a bipartisan Senate bill that focuses on a national semiconductor strategy and it creates a Manufacturing USA Institute for semiconductor manufacturing. The bill is a great curtain raiser, but unfortunately key provisions including income tax credits and almost $7 billion of funding were stripped out of the bill. Therefore, the next step has to be committing government funding for a Made in the USA fab surge. A recent study by the Boston Consulting Group and the Semiconductor Industry Association calls for a $50 billion federal investment to build up 19 new art-of-the-art fabs over the next decades. Right now we have 70. The study predicts the investment would position the U.S. to capture a quarter of the world's growing chip production compared to just 6% if Washington does nothing. In the era of COVID spending, that amount doesn't look so daunting, especially when the consequences are at least as grave for our future. The third step is restricting China's access to the other half of the microchip battle, which is chip manufacturing equipment. The Wall Street Journal has reported that the global wafer fabrication equipment market is estimated to rise 10% this year, with 70% of that growth coming from China. Chinese companies have been busy investing in equipment companies around the world. The U.S. needs a strict embargo on the export of chip manufacturing gear and designs, while also warning allies that selling to China will mean sanctions or worse. This is a war for the entire digital future, from 5G to advanced weapon systems and the command of space. Just as the US could not win World War II if Ford and GM had been second-rate companies compared to Porsche, Volkswagen, and Fiat. So the future of freedom depends on how American semiconductor companies can equip us at this urgent moment, the moment when the chips are really down. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.